First, let me apologize. The last couple of videos, I don't know what's responsible for the jerky image. Image stabilization zone, everything. It may actually be YouTube on its upload. I don't know. About the, I don't really care about the. This is the warmest it's been in a few days. And this being the 60th anniversary of the assassination of JFK, I'm going to tell you what I think and what I know and my deductions on, because I'm tired of the conspiracy theory. Yeah, there was a conspiracy there. I do believe that. But it was, I think, between LBJ and his good friend Lyndon Baines Johnson, who made a bunch of ballot boxes disappear in South Texas. Remember that Kennedy and Nixon were just nose. Nixon just went ahead and yielded to Kennedy. And also around Chicago, Dailyland, ballot boxes disappeared. It was a very narrow margin, and the media didn't like. The media was in love with Jack Kennedy. Here goes. Jack Kennedy was habituated to, this is critical, he had Addison's disease. He was, if you remember in the movie about called The Butler or whatever, the true story, where Kennedy asks the black dude, Forrest Whitaker acting, how many pills a day do I take? He said 103. He was habituated to codeine. I think it wasn't even hydrocodone. It was codeine, which actually doesn't relieve any pain. I'm sorry. He had a bad back, and he took hydrocortisone that was available at the time, and some form of amphetamine for the Addison's disease. Addison's disease is a defect of in adrenal production. Defective. And it will make you crazy. Taking taking an amphetamine every day, all day long. They probably discovered it when his service in the military. I hate this to start with maybe a long video and have a cigarette almost go out on me. Actually, I like these cigarettes. They're very mild, and they keep going out, indicating that they're not full of all kind of additives, phenols, and other things that keep them burning. And so one of the things, the people that really elected, that gave, because remember, Eisenhower had finally decided he was a Republican. He was the preceding president who warned us about the military-industrial complex. And actually, before proceeding, I should go ahead and mention that my memory is really good. I remember the evening that my father and I watched the Kennedy-Nixon debate. And I'm sitting there, I'm a young boy, and I'm kind of watching my dad out of a corner eye, and he's watching both of them. And I'm thinking what I'm thinking, which is, Kennedy talks too fast. He's got that kind of Boston patrician bit of an accent, snobby. We don't like snobs in the family and stuff. And Nixon was constantly trying to get a chance to wipe the schwitz off, the sweat off his upper lip. Kennedy was wearing makeup as well as later, and Nixon was untanned, and it was late in the day. He should have shaved again. Dick Nixon looked kind of shifty. And my dad never told anybody who he voted for. My dad's sole political statement was coming back from the polls of the Kennedy election. He said, look, son, as he showed me his poll tax receipt, he said, look, son, they even make you pay to vote. That's the only political thing my father ever said in his entire time that I knew him. I knew him my whole life until his death. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep jacking around with those because this might go 30 minutes. I think somebody needs to have the perspective of somebody who's really considered, you know, all the elements in this case. And that's one of the primary things that you really have to be aware of is that he was going nuts from the amphetamines. And now what did I do with the damn cigarettes? Oh shit. He was really a party boy. He was Lyndon Baines Johnson, having studied the presidency in college. You know, they admit that, you know, like any commander in chief, you delegate powers and stuff, and it really isn't a working job. The president was mostly a figurehead. And please don't tell me I'll put him in my. I already did it. And it was Lyndon Baines Johnson that actually began being an active, working president. Really, I think there's a similarity between Kennedy and Obama. There, Obama wouldn't even show up for his morning NSA security briefs and shit. He'd sit downstairs playing cards in his dressing gown is what it's called in English, having coffee and probably smoking a cigarette or a joint. It's his house, right? The White House. But it was primarily women, because this is a basic rule of American politics. People tend to vote for the person that they would go to bed with most. I mean, what was it, Nixon, Humphrey? Even at that time, most women, when Nixon got elected, that indicated that most gay men and women would prefer to sleep with Dick Nixon than kind of a mushy little Hubert Humphrey. But Kennedy got elected on the turnout of female and black voters. He had promised the blacks and actually had given them a pen and said, "This is the very pen that I will sign the Civil Rights Act." And in all those years he was in office, he never did anything. It was LBJ that twisted arms in the cloakroom and stuff and actually got it passed. I have far more respect for Lyndon Baines Johnson than John F. Jackoff Kennedy from Boston, Mass. And his fast talking, or his brother. These don't give me any shit. They don't give a fuck about your opinion. As I've already expressed on here, this is my channel. I'm going to say what I want to say. You're free to comment as long as you're polite. But if you take any kind of pot shots at me and shit like that, if you do start going into personal attacks or stuff like that, you're done. So it was right at about 3 years that the NAACP, and this is already Marilyn Monroe, he had already turned over Marilyn Monroe to Brother Bobby because she was already starting to gossip that Jack couldn't get it hard anymore. She was giving him oral in the Oval Office and stuff, and that's about, he was known as Bad in the Sack Jack, 2-Minute Jack, and stuff like that. And you know what happened to her. She was a talker, especially when she get a belly full of pills and booze and shit. She was a liability. Heard so much bullshit on this stuff. The blacks, NAACP, came to the White House, to the Oval Office, after about 3 years, or 3 years after he made the promise, and said, "Mr. President, this is the pen you said you would sign the Civil Rights Act with. Where's the civil rights? It's not even in the House committee or whatever. It's supposed to be, working on it. Not even really, there's no motion on it." So he knew that the gossip was already getting out, number one, about the fact that he was impotent from decades of using amphetamines. Amphetamines makes you impotent. I was going to get a little more vulgar there. And Marilyn Monroe was running her mouth, and the blacks were turning on him. He knew he wasn't going to get reelected. So, as at that time, being the youngest president in U.S. history, knowing that he had a very small chance of being reelected, and he knew he was going crazy and he was impotent and shit, a smart man would quickly deduce that he asked his good, you know, flunky and henchman vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, to set it up and to set it up in Dallas. Really, what was he doing in Dallas that day? Supposed to be a campaigning thing or something? I don't know. Wasn't really announced, and I don't remember them even talking about on the news that were stuff like that. It's why he just kind of suddenly was in Dallas and then got shot. They ran the live radio. The principal of my elementary school ran it on the public address system. The president is dead. No, the weeping and wailing, all the. Then for 3 days we had to put up with. They completely, for 3 days, all TV in America was gone. It was nothing but endless footage of, the caissons go rolling along and shit, and just endless blah, 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 Jack Kennedy. For a typical kid, we were going like, well, got to find something else to do. That's what I think really happened. And these people that go, oh, you couldn't possibly with the Manlickers, bad Italian with the misfires and all the whatever. No. I've been to Dealey Plaza. And that's actually the perfect place to do it. Because from the school repository and stuff, I don't care about the shooters on the grassy knoll shit. That's bullshit. The films that I've seen are the legitimate films of an entry in the back of the head and the exit and so on. There's no, these are all people that are fucking nuts. And they talk about, well, it's almost impossible to hit a moving target like that. No, actually, as you begin right at that turn, instead of going like this, you're actually almost going in a line like this, where it's easy to fix on a head through a scope or on just sights and shit. If you're really good with a rifle like I was, that's exactly the spot I would pick. I wouldn't pick him when he's moving perfectly laterally, although I could do that with. Actually, if you're as good a dove hunter as I was, because doves fly in this tilting, lilting deal, they're the hardest to hit. And I used to go out with like a box of, like 25 shells for $2 and come back with 28 or 30 doves, because sometimes I'd bag 2 at a time because they were close enough together. I really never missed in dove hunting. And to the typical hunter, doves are some of the hardest to hit because of their flight pattern. I don't find any of that. There was nothing wrong with that rifle. And shit, it's the fact that, that Jack Ruby stepped in and gut shot him. They actually let the public in. And that's just further proof that it was inside Texas, LBJ did his part in getting Kennedy elected. Kennedy owed him, and he owed Kennedy. And instead of dying in disgrace or going into disgrace at age 40, wouldn't have even been 50 years old, he decided to go out. He knew that things were getting bad. And he already knew that a bunch of us were really angry with him over the Cuban Missile Crisis shit. he really escalated a lot of shit. Yeah, I know the Russians started it, but we all knew that it was really his fear that he was within less than 6 minutes of a Russian, you know, you know, ballistic missile. He was mostly worried about his own ass. I don't think he was really worried about Americans. So I've heard all them songs. Whatever happened to Martin and John and Abraham and all these heroes? Remember, Abraham started the first white slavery in this country called the draft, where rich people could buy their way out for $300. See, most of you are not fact driven. You've been told a narrative, a line of stories and shit like that. JFK, what did he ever accomplish? Nothing. Lyndon Baines Johnson brought you food stamps. That actually expanded the farm aid bill, the farm bill, to where we could help white folks too, because black people, I think even after they brought in food stamps, at first black people had to pick up the government subsidized, like we bought up the excess milk to maintain milk prices, often turned into cheese, and bought up excess, farm product as part of the agricultural, the farm bill. Food stamps are part of the farm bill. Food stamps don't just help you, they help the farmer. That's what Eisenhower said, is that this emerging lunatic fringe in the Republican Party, now known as libertarians, want to do away with Social Security, farm aid, and other such things. He called them crazy. They are. And if you're a libertarian, you really need to examine what the end results of your policies would be, which would be a return to slavery, indentured servitude, crap like that, all kind of no minimum wage at all. Actually, FDR copied the communists on the 40-hour, and then he picked 40 cents an hour. But jumping all over now, it's Kennedy knew he had only a slim chance coming up against what was a strong Republican Party and stuff. He knew he needed to leave a possible winner who had control over Texas ballot boxes. They found a bunch of ballot boxes about 15 years ago, 20 years ago in South Texas. They were so badly decomposed and stuff and then the media just said on the story. But that's where oh gosh. So the minute he's dead, that means Lyndon Baines Johnson takes office. He was sworn in on Air Force One, remember? And he did run one more, it put him in a sympathetic position, because he could have ran, because he finished out that little bit of a term, ran in for one term, and beat, Goldwater. And then during the Vietnam War, announced that even though he was eligible to run again, he said, if nominated, I will not accept. If elected, I will not serve. Because he knew that, Vietnam was the military-industrial complex expending munitions and just transferring, taxpayers and taxpayer debt. Because please remember, when this was happening in, say, 68, because I remember the Dow Jones average was at 300. It took a sudden 10% drop one day, and my brother had to eat dirt on that one. Just a 30-point drop. Nowadays, a 30 to 70-point drop is negligible in 35,000. And our national debt, Dow Jones was 300, and our national debt, before we really began pumping up the Vietnam War, was only 300 billion. I didn't say trillion. I said billion with a B. And look at where we are now. With all the Keynesian economics that communist Franklin Delano Roosevelt started. It was Lyndon Baines Johnson that brought you SSI to people who get disabled early. He's the one who expanded the food stamp program, which helped not only poor people, but finally started helping poor black people not have to go to a church and wait and be, humiliated every week to go in there and pick up their government cheese and their government peanut butter and their government canned pork and all that other stuff that the government buys up as price supports to farmers and producers. So, you people that are accepting, you know, getting, everybody got food stamps during the pandemic, didn't they? And extra, and if you're young and you got disabled, I mean, think about what it was like to be young and disabled before SSI. You were fucked. You really were. You're totally screwed. There was no SSI to best of my. You free to correct me on the. There was no supplemental security income, and real I don't think it was no Medicaid at that before that. And he accomplished more in a short time. He just had to continue on with the war that the military-industrial complex that he was their flunky. I keep reminding y'all, it's not the Democrats or the Republicans that run anything. It's a group of people that belong to both parties, or no party, or nothing. They're, it's actually can be your Joe average, United Auto Workers pension fund is buying into and profiting from the military-industrial complex. If you listen to my previous videos, I've told you this. One of the first things that's really got to happen is we have to make people invest directly in businesses, preferably local businesses. I may make a whole separate video about it's this available money that right next to me, a guy who's already, you can read it down there. I haven't deleted any of his comments. There's a nice man who's just to the east of me who's wants to bring me a plate on Thanksgiving Day. I'll be here. And he's close to a little town called Hutto, which we had a construction job there when I was young. And we all thought that Hutto was going to be just completely dead shortly. And now they got this mega building site on the northeast side of Austin. I don't know how many, because I didn't want to read that far into the article. I just, looked at the pictures and read a few. Oh God, it's enormous. I don't know how many big, giant corporations are. The expansion of Austin scares me because it kind of ties into a series of disturbing dreams that I had a long time ago. I know that my own work on a project with a libertarian engineer where I proved I needed help on the math. I needed somebody to handle the math. Well, I did the thinking. I'm the idea man. He was the engineer. And I actually figured out a system where we could actually house 100 billion people just within the confines of Texas. And then it starts from the ground up, 100 stories minimum and stuff like that, and leave the rest of the world, if properly managed and stuff, into this playground. And with no pesticides, no nothing and stuff, you can, please. And as you go out of that big megalopolis, but then I was working on him. But after finishing all that, me and Bruce fell out because he's a libertarian. And then sometime I realized that may have been the source of it, but again, having these dreams about this dying, decaying megalopolis, this giant city. And to tell you the truth, I think it's starting here. I think this may be the heart of the megalopolis I saw in my dreams. Dreams are the product of what they can at times be truly premonitory, because your brain is predicting the future. And sometimes your brain, based on the first parts of sleep, you sort and file, and then you begin to play around with and get into the more fantastic, and predictive parts in the final cycles of sleep. So the way this area is exploding, especially given that they're now having to go east to get water. They're robbing the water from underneath my property right now. And it's going to Williamson County and to San Antonio already. Savannah, Post Oak, yada, yada. And not all of us are being paid. They're only paying 9 cents per 1,000 gallons. They're going to have to start robbing to the east, and that's the only real direction that they can explode now. They've gone about as far west in the beginnings of this megalopolis that they can, without constantly going in and angering. You're setting up a conflict right there. Some of these dreams, I know I'm supposed to be talking about Kennedy, I'll get back to it, but in the dreams, I'll tell you briefly, I'll describe them more. It got to be where this was a culture that really only used icons. There were really no books. It was just a decaying megalopolis. And towards the end of this long series of dreams that spanned about a 2-year period, the people that I would be trying to communicate with, they had no concept of the word outdoors. I kept asking them, where's the, how do I get outside? They'd look at me quizzically, etc. So 27 minutes. So I don't think the future is particularly bright for humans unless, let me put it like this. I brought up that whole thing there because, like Greta Thunberg has turned to supporting the Palestinians because she can see her anger at the ecology and stuff like that isn't going anywhere. At anger at carbon, we need that carbon. If mankind doesn't keep bringing carbon up that's sequestered from previous bio-rich eras and putting that carbon into the air, and without that carbon in the air, carbon dioxide particularly, and the Haber process, we could not support. And this goes back to data of 1913. We were already running out of any, especially Europe and other, where the most densely populated areas were and stuff like that. We were running out of fertilizer. Then Fritz Haber created a process in which he could extract nitrogen from the atmosphere. The hippies go, oh, that's just petroleum based. Actually, you can use any kind of fuel. You're not getting the nitrogen out of the petroleum. You're getting the nitrogen out of the air to make ammonia and ammonium nitrate, which is absolutely critical in our manufacturing and all kind of things in our agriculture. If Haber hadn't come along, then we wouldn't be able to support, even at this point in time, probably no more than 3 billion people. I figured out a way to support 100 billion people, but I think that led to my predicting that what's going to happen anyway is these megalopolises. And the world outside was part of the deal. Is when you go on vacation, you bring back a moose carcass, or you bring back a few bags of that wild cotton out there growing, or some racks of blueberries, and that's part of your contribution to the immediate thing. It's, of course, I have to factor in all kind of the identity, search for individual identity, and especially in dense populations, is psychological. And most people really can't stand that much crowding, but look at the mega cities already on this planet. How big is Mexico City now? And that's still the biggest? What is it running at now? 25 million or something? 5 million living on the landfills? I don't know. I haven't really researched it because, hey, the problem with Mexico, it's full of Mexicans. Okay, I'm sorry. So I hope I've given you a little glimpse into a thinker's mind, is that I think John Kennedy was impotent, both between Marilyn Monroe gossip and the NAACP showing up and pointing out that he was doing nothing to advance civil rights and stuff. He ordered his own assassination. That's really what happened to Jack Kennedy. He was going nuts from taking 103 pills a day. He probably felt horrible, and he didn't want to, so he wanted to be remembered forever, and therefore he got it. Jack Kennedy ordered his own execution, his own assassination. And Lyndon came in and filled it, actually finished promises that actually he went further than Kennedy. Like I said, food stamps, SSI, Medicaid came along there somewhere. And even Johnson knew that there was about to be a major political shift because that's the way they always do it. You almost never occupy the White House for more than 8 years before the pendulums got to swing, because they, in military industrial complex, have to give you an illusion that your vote means something. Your vote is meaningless. Unless you're voting strictly on like local issues, or it might actually be voting for national people who don't have to, representatives who don't have, president doesn't have to follow any, there is no mandate. So here we are on the 60th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination, which I'm quite sure he ordered himself. He got relief from his back pain, finally, and he got to live forever in history. And he didn't lose the next election as the youngest president to ever be elected and then lose immediately, because it wasn't looking good for him. The women and the blacks had already turned on him. They were letting him know. Some of you good people are not very good at political science. I am. I'm good enough to know that I know who runs this planet. It's the actually, it's a lot of the average Joe people. It's anybody who pours money. That's the problem right now, is there's so much excess money that they're building a huge complex out at Hutto that right now, I'll finish with this. There's so much excess money out there. They're talking about maybe building more in Austin when there's already 5 million square feet of brand new, never been occupied, no possible leases in sight, office space alone. And they say that there's a homeless problem in Austin when the city could easily condemn a property. I probably could do that under eminent domain and immediately house all the homeless. So what if they trash the building? It'll create new jobs by tearing it down and making some room. Because downtown Austin looks horrific. I really hate the look of Austin now. But 35 minutes. Jack Kennedy, people didn't really know you. They say, Jack, we hardly knew ye. No. I knew right off the bat, I think just like my dad. My dad may have voted for the shifty-eyed Nixon dude just because he looked closer to a working man than Kennedy. Simple as that. And my dad had no interest in sleeping with men. My dad probably chose the least attractive one of them just because Kennedy came off as a rich snob. And fast talking to a native Texan, especially a guy like my father, who was not a fast talker like me, just don't cut it. I got to stop now because I'm probably at 10 gigabytes.